A lot of people actually think that the Greek word for tongues in 1 Corinthians is glossolalia, defined as a phenomenon of ecstatic speaking, with incomprehensible sounds, and, you just can't make out anything, right? According to the dictionary, it can also mean psychiatric or psychological disorder because of the ecstatic, utterance, which a lot of people call speaking in tongues in today's culture. But scholars actually revisited this topic and argued that the Greek word for tongues in 1 Corinthians is in fact glossa, which refers to speaking in a language, as opposed to, just ecstatic sounds, right? And this actually makes a whole lot of sense, because when you read the text in 1 Corinthians 14, where Paul says in verse 2 that you're not speaking to men and you're speaking to God, So, and if people don't understand and there's nobody to interpret, just sit down. Paul, goes further and elaborates what he's talking about in 1 Corinthians 14, verses 10 and 11. And I think that's actually, that can be very helpful to understand what the nature of, of the tongues. And Paul says that he's talking about languages of the world. You just got to read 1 Corinthians 14 and verses 10 and 11, and it says all languages in the world have meaning, but as soon as you speak in another language or another tongue, and that without an interpretation or without somebody to actually translate the language, you're basically a foreigner to your audience, to the congregation. And that's what Paul is saying. And so, in other words, Paul is still talking about the same gift that we read about in Acts chapter 2, where, in Acts chapter 2, they were speaking to men because Jews from all over the world, from every nation under heaven, were present. And so they knew the languages. And so when they were speaking in tongues, people could understand. But in 1 Corinthians, we have to recognize that Paul is addressing a specific situation where there's a local congregation in a certain culture, and they all speak, a certain tongue. They speak the same language. They are Corinthians, and these are not people from all over the world. These are just Corinthians gathered in a congregation. And so when they were speaking in tongues, people were left confused because there was nobody to interpret or translate. Now, the fact that Paul is talking about interpreting the tongue shows that he's talking about an actual established language that can be comprehended, and it's not glossolalia, which cannot be comprehended, but it's actually glossa, which is a tongue or a language that can be understood and can be translated and interpreted to the listeners. So we have to, go with what the Bible says. In other words, what we take from that is that speaking in tongues in the Bible refers to speaking in other languages, and does not, refer to speaking in, some kind of ecstatic utterance. And so, what people are calling speaking in tongues today is not the same gift that we read about in the scriptures. That's basically the point.